How are you? I hope this is a very pleasing and wonderful Saturday for you. This is Aaron Wells, Executive Director of North Philly Project, lifelong Philadelphia resident, hanging out in North Carolina a little bit, a lot of it actually, um, but the heartbeat of North Philadelphia, where I spend so much of my time. North Philly Project. North Philly Project has been created, established, and come together to help address issues in North Philadelphia, specifically the 19132, 19121. Um, we're comprised of people who love North Philly. We're comprised of people who love our city, but who see the worth of our community, who sees the worth of the people in our community. And so our time, our resources, both material and in time, our people resources, our effort, our energy are all geared toward making sure that our North Philly has what it needs to be well, has what it needs um, to heal, and has what it needs to sustain that healing and wellness. This is Wellness in You. It's our monthly offering, conversations about health and wellness in North Philadelphia. Um, our conversations topic wellness of mind, body, and soul. Joining me often is my one of my sidekicks, my brother and friend, my comrade, Terrence Johnson. And so together we sort of hang out and have these discussions. We have these wonderful guests that come in and participate in conversation. And you're going to enjoy our guest today. And that would be my brother, Dr. Neil Pitts. And he's going to introduce himself and talk about who he is. And we'll get into some great conversation. North Philly Project presents Wellness in You, the way. Conversations about health and wellness in North Philadelphia, and our conversations topic wellness of mind, body, and soul. Um, Before I bring Dr. Pitts in to create conversation, I just want to share a few things that I find to be really, really important as we set the table for this. Most of our conversations, if not all of our conversations, are based on our perception that the wellness needed for our community. There's a template. Um, SAMHSA has created these 8 dimensions of wellness. When we look at wellness and in our community, we look at the general health of our community. We're looking at the holistic health. We're looking at the totality of health. We're looking at total health for the men and women, the boys and girls, the kings and queens, families of our community. We are a complex being as human beings. And so um, our wellness is tied in, not in one dimension, but in several dimensions. And complete wellness, from our view, does not take place until there is a joining of, there's a rhythm, a flow in all areas of our lives. We're talking about intellectual, social, spiritual, physical, occupational, emotional, environmental, and financial wellness. Somewhere in all of those topics of dimensions, we can find some work to do for us and for community. And so just wanted to make sure that we understood that with Wellness and You, that North Philly Project, we present the fact and the evidence that we as complex human beings, we get to look at all of us, every part of us. And what a wonderful work that each day we put time in for ourselves, that each day we look at how we can be the best us on a regular basis. And so with that said, I just want to say hello to my good brother Terrence Johnson. Just say hello to everybody if you don't mind.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you
And
fine. Coming in loud
good,
and clear, good brother.
good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
Terrence, you're my sidekick, brother. So this how we get down. You know.
Yes.
Um, Terrence, we have I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet our guest today. but I've spent some time on phone in a couple of meetings. Very impressed with the first and most important thing that one, this is a Kenyan community, but second, more than anything else, he went to Simon Gratz. And so we want to make sure that the important things are
Yes.
noted and expressed before we do anything else. Everybody, this is Dr. Neil Pitts, and the founder of the Miriam Medical Clinics of Philadelphia. Dr. Neil Pitts, welcome to Wellness and You. You're muted, Doc. Whatever you're saying is important because you went to Gratz, but we can't hear you. Well, while we're waiting on Dr. Pitts to come through on audio, just want to share that according to the 2019 and the 2022 Pew Charitable Trust State of the City report for Philadelphia, it's intentionalized in conversation and to share that Philly is going through urban renewal. And you can see that with the building. You can see that with construction. You can see that as we change the landscape of our city. And in this urban renewal, we have to guarantee, we have to be a unified community so that we can ensure that this revitalization that happens does not leave people out. We call it gentrification. In gentrification, we do understand that there are some negative dynamics that affect people who are marginalized. One of the things that we want to be able to do in our efforts of wellness is we want to be able to eradicate the generational poverty that drives the opportunity for others to come in and to capitalize on our situations, to capitalize on the issues of our community, to capitalize on these seams that people can come in and manipulate for their good, and in that to leave some of us out of this revitalization, which is called gentrification. When we look at wellness and health on a well-rounded basis, the reality of it is that the playing field is set up for gentrification because we're not well. Because if we had been, if we were as a community, then we would not only be a part of revitalization, it wouldn't be something that's happening without us, it'd be something that would be happening with us. And so when we talk about wellness, when we talk about healing, when we talk about addressing the issues, it is so that as a people, that we get the rhythm of participation where we can collectively move through and be a part of what's happening in our community and in our city, where we take ownership in, where we are not just people who have things happening around them, but we are participants in the change, which benefits our families, all of our family, our seniors, our families, our marriages, our schools, our young people. It benefits us completely. Health and wellness is not just a singular, small, siloed topic. Our health and our wellness are all connected to the best of who we can be and what our community has. Dr. Pitts, are you still muted? I still don't hear you. But I tell you what, you work on that. We're good, and we'll get you in just a second. So as Dr. Pitts is working on the sound piece, I want to give you some statistics about North Philadelphia that I find to be very important and connected to the wellness of community. Various statistical sources state that 54% of North Philly population is living below the poverty level. Now, take this. That means that over half of the North Philadelphia population lives under the poverty level. Well, with poverty comes the health disparities. With poverty comes financial lack. With poverty comes the issues of trauma and the realization of being trauma-driven in all decisions of life. This affects our education systems. The education statistics remain alarming for our area schools, and this is according to two recent very important surveys and researches that the 2018, the high school graduation rates were only 69% and much lower than most of the nation, which is at 84%. Those numbers actually have improved slightly, but those are skewed numbers as we look at that, because some of what we have seen, especially with the gaps that we saw during COVID, many schools are underperforming, but they're still passing our students through. And so these things come with the unwellness of community. Pew Charitable Trust goes on to say that the poverty in Philadelphia is so widespread, and that its highest concentrations are found in North Philadelphia and in West Philadelphia. In some of these areas, including much of North Philadelphia, the poverty rate is over 45%. It's over 45%. And in most of the city's zip codes, it's over 20%. And so when we look at these numbers, the urgency to address unwellness and the urgency to address the issues of our community becomes so visible to us, and they become large and they loom over everything. And so we bring on people like Dr. Pitts, great thinkers who have ideas, who have thoughts, who insert into community, and to be able to help bring the wellness needed for us to live the lives that we truly desire to live. So with that said, let's give it a shot again. Dr. Pitts, I still can't hear you. What about you, Terrence?
You hear me now?
Yeah, I've heard you the whole time.
Okay, yeah, I keep getting kicked off, so I switched to my phone. So should be good now. I think I'm good now. So long as I'm here, yes.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. As we continue just in conversation, Terrence, I want to mention one more thing. And it says that the trauma created through generational poverty, food deserts, lack of quality health care, and workforce development are the major concerns for North Philadelphia residents. And so that creates, Terrence, the needs for effective programs and services and initiatives. What can we do, Terrence, to begin to address the unwellness of community, to promote and to insert wellness into community?
Well, I know, you threw out a question too prior to coming on about have really defined what community is, or have we properly defined what community is. I think we have to really embrace that the real definition of community is supporting one another. We often work programs, organizations like North Philly Project, different ones. Oftentimes we work in silos, and we don't pool resources. And so platforms like this that we can bring, Dr. Pitts on, and in the future bring other organizations on and pool resources and just, and bring all the like-minded people together to just address and one that community working together so that we can define, exactly what the disparities are. And then once it's defined, put program in place, not just in that one silo, but to expand it out throughout, not just North Philadelphia, the entire city. And it's just going to take a collaborative. I think the first thing we have to do is collaborate, and then we have to educate. We oftentimes throw out all the statistics, all the disparities. We've said that in nauseum, but have we come up with solutions? And one solution, I think, is that collaboration of bringing, break down the silos of that crabs in a barrel mentality in our communities.
I concur. I grab hold of that. One of the things that we're seeing right now is that so many people collectively, Terrence, are understanding the urgency, right?
Yes.
That we've not, we don't have the luxury of passing on to another generation the issues. We don't have that luxury. And so many of us are understanding that.
Can you hear me now, Manny?
Yes, we can, Dr. Pitts.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
Good.
so many of us, Terrence, are understanding that now is the time. Dr. Pitts and I actually had this conversation yesterday. Now is the time, and here's the place. We have to put and draw a line in the sand. First, we have our young people literally eradicating each other on our streets, and then we have the negative results of gentrification movements that are happening without us. We were blessed to see, and we celebrate the new grocery store that was placed in North Philadelphia on 21st Street, but we haven't had that since the 60s, maybe, or the 70s.
Mhm.
That's appalling.
Wow.
And so for us to be able to move, we've got to move collectively. We've got to move collectively. We have to move in unison and in rhythm. And we don't have to see eye to eye on everything, but we have to come together on the important points and be able to support one another. So you actually create great conversation with your response, Terrence. Dr. Pitts, are you there, my friend? Can you hear us?
I am here. Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear and see.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad. Technology is sometimes baffling. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you, Mr. Wells. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your invitation. I need to, at the very outset, make one amendment to or one revision, Mr.
Yes.
Wells, what you said with regard to Miriam Medical Clinics. I am one of a collaborative of individuals, like-minded individuals who are co-founders of Miriam Medical Clinics. And so together, we have seen a need in our communities that we are trying to address with regard to healthcare disparities and mostly access to care. So, many individuals, for a number of reasons, of course, you and I have spoken about these reasons, but a number of individuals do not have proper access to care, either through issues of distrust or just being able to go to a practicing provider with some sense that practicing provider has their well-being at the heart of what they do. And so Miriam Medical Clinics tries to provide that heart and to join hearts with our community members. We've been in existence now for about actually we started this journey in 2012 and finally opened our first clinic in 2014. We've been around for a little while. But yeah, before I launch into that, I'm just very, very glad to be here and enter into any discussion that you'd like to enter into.
I appreciate that so much, Dr. Pitts. One of the things that Terrence and I talked about on our Wellness Chronicles, which is Monday at 7 o'clock here, just let everybody know. One of the things that we talked about and I continue to bring up is as we begin to dig in, because that's what we're about to do, the issue of community. So my thought and question has been to anyone who would listen, are we correctly defining community? And the reason I've asked that, when we started North Philly Project, many of us were people who grew up in the 60s and 70s in Philadelphia, in North Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
As we began to come together as a group, put our thumbprint on the issues with solutions, we found that the North Philly that many of us fondly remember no longer exists. Mm-hmm. And so the urban areas that many of us fondly remember no longer exist. Mm-hmm. And so my question has been, have we caught up with whatever the redefining of community is? Whatever community looks like, are we actually trying to serve and support and resource a community that we remember? Or are we actually going to be impactful by addressing a community that is today. So with this, I ask you the question, Dr. Pitts, can we help a community that we don't understand? Better question, are we understanding the community that exists?
Yeah, it's a good question. One that I ask myself a lot during each day, actually. So I, along with you, am a product of this community. My family, just to give you a brief background, because you speak of the 60s and the 70s, I go back a bit further than that, in as much as my family moved to the Nicetown, Tioga section of the city in 1953. And so I grew up literally right around the corner from Erie Avenue and from Germantown Avenue and et cetera, et cetera. I know I knew the community very well, and I say knew because, you know, pertinent to your question is, do we really understand the needs of our community where it is now? It's no longer the community that we grew up in, the community where neighbors watched out for neighbors, where adult neighbors watched out for the neighbor's child. It's not that any longer, and so I think the charge to all of us is to really meet people where they are and address issues, but in so doing, to listen to what these issues are, which we may not be familiar with. Example could be we are not. Well, I won't speak for we. I'll say myself. You know, I have difficulty understanding how neighbors in certain in the context of a block of you know, your city neighborhood, in the context of a block or a neighborhood, we may not know our next door neighbor. We may not know them well, and so I have difficulty understanding the context in which that exists, the isolation in which that exists. Further, of community and healthcare. You know, do we understand the fact that, you know, there are, you know, where there used to be family physicians in the neighborhoods, you know, with their private practices, that no longer exists, right? So you could go around the corner, and for me, it was going around the corner on the Erie Avenue and visiting with Dr. Coleman. Well, you know, Dr. Coleman or Dr. Turner are no longer there. Temple University Hospital, however, is. And so the question is, because we don't have that one-on-one trusting relationship with a Dr. Coleman or a Dr. Turner or a Dr. Hawkins, how do we now transfer and translate the trust that we had with those individuals into a trusting relationship, a reliable relationship with places like Temple Hospital or the University of Pennsylvania Hospital? And you get the gist of that, right? And so we don't understand in large the factors that have led us to where we are, other than looking at the context of redlining, of poverty, of isolation, right? And those are issues that loom large in our community. So what we need to do, I think, is listen carefully for the stories of people's lives. You know, without that, then we have no context with which to move forward.
That's key. No, I think that listening piece, injecting ourselves into community so we can listen and find out what those members on that block are saying and what they are in need of. I think we're not injecting as a whole. injecting ourselves with an open ear to listen, to find out really what is the heartbeat of the community now? What is the makeup of the communities now? We look at it from afar, look at it, unfortunately, from the 24-hour news cycle. But are we actually, listening, injecting ourselves in to listen? And I think, we started off something that we want to continue with the town hall, injecting ourselves into the community, listening to those young men and women, that are 16 to 25 years of age, to let them know that that's what our job is from here forward, is to listen and to let them be heard, so that we can then, get the Dr. Pitts and the Miriam Clinic, the information they need, so we can do what they do in the communities properly. So that listening piece, but also in order to listen, we have to inject ourselves into the community and not do it from afar, not do it from outside of the community, to try to do it. And so many of the things that try to affect change are not part of the community. They're not injected in the community. They're doing it from that far vantage point instead of an injected vantage point.
Yeah, I sign off on that also, Terrence. Truly believe in that whole piece that says nothing for them without them. And that's right. If we're going to do this, we have to do this together. And we can't come in, and this is just Aaron Wells' version of things, but that Christian missionary mindset where I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you and come in and tell you, I'm going to make it right with this. No, not only is that wrong, literally just told a population of people that who you are is not important, how you got here is not important, what you think is not important. And the worst of it all, I know better for you than you know for yourself. And so we have to include community and have community define itself, because we often say that we want to help people find a voice, but people do have a voice. We need to be able to give people the opportunity to express and to let their voice be heard. So I'm flowing right with both of you on this. As you was talking, Dr. Pitts, you mentioned some things that really landed on my perch. The issue of relationship is vital. The issue of trusting relationship is vital. People share with people they're comfortable with. People engage with people they're comfortable with. So as you continue this, and we continue this conversation, what are you seeing is, this piece where the work you do is from ground level. You spend time here because those are the resources, those are the people from your echelon of experience and education, your comrades, but you work here, right? And so tell us what you're seeing from here, the health disparities that you're seeing, and you begin to mention things from a human standpoint that aren't just about diagnosis or just about research topics. You begin talking about things like relationships and trust. What are some of the non-COVID pressing issues that are barriers for our wellness and community?
Sure. It's interesting. You mentioned that, I've got a couple of vantage points, right? One is that I'm on the faculty at Temple University Medical School. And in that regard, I do have access to a number of resources. That's on one hand. On the other hand, it's a matter of now working within the community to be a channel, to be an avenue for those resources, and those resources need to address certain issues, as you mentioned, non-COVID issues. We've been dealing with COVID now for the last couple of years. We have to continue that, right? But what was here before COVID was the hypertension, the diabetes, the type 2 diabetes, COPD. They were here long before COVID. should we gain some semblance of control over COVID, which would be a good thing, we still don't have control over the hypertension, the diabetes, the asthma, the COPD. Those have long remained out of our reach, and there are a number of reasons for that. Just I think from my perspective, and going taking a deeper dive with regard to access issues. For one thing, access issues, as I said, because of trust, that underlying mistrust, right? But there are also other things that are going on in our neighborhoods. The trauma that people have experienced in their lives is absolutely astounding and astonishing. You think, okay, I can't trust that my child, when I release them to go to school in the morning, I can't trust that my child is going to return to me in the afternoon in the same way that I released him or her to go to school in the morning. That's huge in people's lives, right? Whether or not people have enough food to eat, it's huge in people's lives. We live in a number of food deserts, and
Absolutely.
that's the reality. That's just the reality. And so people are struggling with getting. If you talk about diabetes and hypertension, particularly, people are struggling to purchase good, nutritious foods. Every
Yes.
day, if you're going down to the corner to the local bodega, then without having access to Super Fresh and other places that might meet your nutritional needs, and that's an issue. There are homeless individuals on our streets every day. One of the mobile clinic that we work with, sees people with homeless issues walking up and down Broad Street every day with mental health issues every day, walking up and down Broad Street. And so even before we get to the diagnosis of high blood pressure, of diabetes, of COPD, what have you, even before we get to that, we got to deal with some of these other issues. And so if you look at some of these other issues, broadly defined as social determinants of health, then you begin to peel back the onion of what's going on in people's lives, and then addressing those larger issues that are a consequence of what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, we've got to be able to, and thank you for that. We've got to be able to dig in. We've got to be able to understand what those social determinants are and what that looks like for individuals as we connect. The disparities that you talk about and that you share, many of us, we do understand that. We do understand what those look like. Rather, the lack of insurance, the lack of access, because there are plenty of resources on the landscape. Everybody can't access them. As you said, neighborhood doctors, because I remember mine on Lehigh Avenue, neighborhood doctors replaced by larger medical centers, indoor hospitals. So now there's a cost attached to that. And if I can't meet that cost, but I need those services, I'm now digging deeper into debt, into poverty. And so this cycle, because of my need, this cycle of generational poverty continues simply because I'm trying to live and to access things that everyone else has. With all of these issues understood, what makes Miriam different? What makes Miriam unique? What makes Miriam this entity that brings a solution. As you and I talked about, was one of my favorite things. It helps us take a bite out of this large elephant. How does Miriam help us take a bite out of this large elephant that are issues in our community?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that question, Mr. Wells. And even there, the answers are complex, but the one that does occur to me, the one part of that answer that occurs to me is that Miriam Clinic, by and large, are people of color and really do address issues that deal with communities of color. And a community, people of color, meaning we are largely African American. We've got to do staff for sure, but we began with the mindset of having people who look like our community really at the forefront of dealing with individuals in the community. You mentioned earlier that that having someone that looks like you, someone that relates to you, is someone that you may feel that you can share certain information with, right? And so you might be able to share, for example, that your lights have been turned off the day before. You might be able to do that. You might be able to share that your son was either just shot or imprisoned for shooting someone else. You might be able to share things that speaks to the trauma of people's lives, but it's a matter of getting down, taking a deep dive with understanding that that's going on with our individuals. People of color sharing that with people of color, or more to the point, people of compassion and people who can readily have a heart meet, as it were, a heart connection with you. This is what Miriam strives to be. But Miriam itself is on a journey. Right? We're on a journey in as much as this is what we are seeking to perfect in our communities as much as we can. Right? And it's important because if you can meet someone at a level, this is Neil Pitt's version and view of the world, right? If you can meet someone with compassion and with love and with caring, and you're a healthcare professional, and you can sort of meet individuals right where they are, and serve as an access point, an avenue to places like Temple University or Einstein, and you can literally take people's hands and say, look, this is something that we will be with you in this. We will travel along this road with you. We had an incident, not an incident really, but someone came to our mobile clinic on Broad Street a few weeks ago with signs and symptoms of stroke. He had high blood pressure. He had already had a stroke. But two of our staff members walked this individual down to the ER at Temple University, and saw that he was at least admitted. Well, not admitted. I'm sorry, that's too strong a word. Saw that he was at least seated in the ER waiting area, and able to connect with his professionals with his health providers afterwards, because they happen to be on the staff at Temple, which is where I sit. But it's that kind of connection and that kind of navigation that we need to really be more intentional about, right? And so one of the things that we view for Miriam in the long term is to have that kind of connection and that kind of ability to navigate with our patients, because they'll trust us, and they'll and let me back up for a second. They may trust us because trust, we recognize, is a process,
Yes.
right? It's a process.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
so we intend to continue to show up so that we can enter that process of trust, and then get back to, okay, you need a specialist, you need to be admitted to the hospital, whatever. The big boys in the neighborhood, with whether we like it or not, are Temple and Einstein.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so can we serve as entry points for individuals in the neighborhoods to those entities?
I appreciate this so much, Dr. Pitts. The mental health component, when we talk about trauma in community, and which we know is just a response to life situations, both inherited and those that we develop as we live life. What is the mental health component for Miriam? We know that the physical is connected to the emotional and the mental.
Sure.
We understand and see what's happening on our landscape in community. Our reality is, a great segment of our people in community they're just beat down. They're just
Sure.
beat down from what life has offered. And so mental health is becomes at the top of the list, if not outweighing, but parallel to our physical health. And they're married, as we know. What is the mental health component for Miriam, as you are creating a portal for health and wellness and community?
Sure. And we are trying to create a portal for that mental health aspect as well. Just recently, we've had some conversations with individuals who are psychologists, who might have some way of helping us to deal with the trauma that we see in our patients. And so we have we're trying to develop a way of referral to those individuals. We've had some recent conversations with individuals only recently, within the past couple of weeks, actually, around this very issue. It is still developing, I must say that, but we're sensitive to the aspect that mental health is really at the top of the list when it comes to dealing with our communities. One of the things that Miriam has, we have something called a talk to the doctors session, in which we prior to COVID, we did it in person, but we are now we're thinking about doing a hybrid soon, with regards to discussion with doctors. The one that we are trying to develop now, this particular session, will have to do with mental health. It'll have to do with two aspects, actually. One was mental health, and one is how do we help our communities deal with physical pain, and that conference is to take place. We are targeting October for that conference to take place. And I can certainly, Mr. Wells, Mr. Johnson, I can certainly provide the link to you when we have that discussion.
That was absolutely great.
Yes.
Absolutely great.
People can actually ask questions of our providers.
That access, and that's not an overused word. I think that's an underused word. That access to information just becomes so vital as people build the wellness that they need, that they desire, that they want. Terrence, you work with our youth. What are you hearing as Dr. Pitts is sharing about the services of Miriam, the availability of Miriam, but just through this conversation, as far as connectivity to our youth, which you're a driver for, what are you hearing?
Well, what I'm hearing is the lack of the Miriams. um, you know, folks that look like them that they can trust. So, I'm hearing where where are more models and clinics like Miriam out there. So, I would, just that's the question out there. Where are more? Why aren't there more models and organizations like Miriam Clinic out there, knowing all of the disparities, knowing that those, the issue of trust from the community, that people look like them. There are a lot of um, clinicians, doctors, psychologists that look like us out there. But the question is, why aren't we injecting ourselves into the community like we spoke before, and making that access available to the youth and their families? That those are the questions that I, from a youth perspective, because dealing with the youth in the programs that I serve them in, we do what we do from an educational standpoint, and from a building up of some basic life skills standpoint. But then they leave for the day. They go back to the community, where a lot of the work that's done is they have to put that in their back pocket and survive, and go back to unhealthy environments where their mental gets hijacked. Gets hijacked, and they have to shift and move. It's a lot. So having the actual access, immediate access, easy access to those Miriam clinics and things, that type of access, not mental health as well as physical wellness as well, is what I'm hearing out there from the youth. Where there's a need anyway, that injection of more of that model of being a community, and more parts of the community, where Miriam might be on Broadway, that somebody else could be somewhere else, and more access to it. So I will put that out there to why aren't there more, and are there talks to expand and bring more clinics like Miriam on out there into the communities.
Terrence, I'm with you on that, and hopefully this model will be a model that others can look at, emulate, that others can look at and begin to create in community, hopefully. And that's the hope, right? That once the exposure that is needed for models like Miriam Medical Clinic, that people can see this works. Let's see how we can utilize, because the other part of that is, Dr. Pitts, as we know, if we don't have people to come alongside of us, at some point in time, if I'm the only one out there with this big issue, then we start looking at burnout. We start looking at overuse, right? We start looking at those type of things. So the hope is that other models will come. We'll be able to see and to emulate what's happening. Dr. Pitts, I want to ask you this. Actually, it's both for you and Terrence. If we did a 1, 2, 3, now again, that's challenging because it's a 1 through a million, the issues that we have to address. But if we chose priorities for you, just from where you sit, from what you see, from your daily endeavors, from your history in the community, from your desired outcomes, what would be your 1, 2, 3? And Terrence, I'm asking you the same thing, and I'll address mine. What can we do immediately to support the community in the arena of wellness? And for wellness here, obviously, we're talking about all components of all dimensions of wellness connected. So if you had to pick a 1, 2, 3 to start Monday morning, or to start this afternoon, what would it be?
I think for me, it would absolutely be education. It would be education on issues of access to healthcare, certainly, but also just issues at the very individual level of how we can begin to address our many issues as an individual, right? And so looking at, you know, looking at seeking resources in the community, right? And so where one has healthcare issues, looking to connect with individuals as to where those healthcare issues might be addressed. Where one has food issues, how can we deal with those as well, right? Um, and so there are, and I'm trying to sort of condense my answer.
Yes.
hard, hard to do, right? Um,
Yeah.
but at least, you know, if someone like two things, if someone like a Miriam was to go to begin to canvass around local churches, for example, you know, just to be available to individuals to ask these questions. Well, what can I do about my issues of healthcare? What can I do about my issues of food? Those kinds of things. I would want to start by actually going around to various churches, assembling people together and talking about those issues, right? And then even beyond that, to very quickly to your point of doing being more than just Miriam doing that. You know, we would want to serve as a model for other people to emulate what it is that we are trying to do. We've got a clinic that we are just one of our clinics that we just opened up in South Philadelphia. So we're reaching down into South Philadelphia as well, which is actually our home clinic on Tasker Street. But if people can come along and sort of like see what it is that we're trying to do and emulate that across the city, we could change healthcare in this city. So I'll end there. And you have to ask me. You have to learn not to ask me these questions. I can go on about
You and here's the deal. You can go on if you choose to. I find these things seriously just so important. The reality of it is, we stop when you're ready to stop. Our line in the sand is drawn, and it is just simply time for us to stop finding reasons not to and find every reason to. I appreciate that, Dr. Pitts. Terrence, for you, good brother, your 1, 2, 3 immediately today to support wellness in community. If you had and could and would, what would those 1, 2, 3s be for you?
I mean, number one, I think the healthcare systems, if that's a thing, that community of healthcare systems need to get to know the community. They really need to get to know it intimately in order to really address it. I mean, yeah, you know, and I just think there's a disconnect between the actual, community, and that's why the disparities are so great, and then the actual healthcare community. And that's why the Miriam clinics and those models make such a huge impact, and they don't get the wind beneath their wings that they need, because they know the community intimately, because they come from it. They are products of it. And like I said, they look like the community. So I think number one, that will be one thing that I would do. And then, education is always in there. And then with that, getting to know, you educate the community that, you can be intimate and open and transparent with your healthcare providers, regardless of what they look like. But I think there's the disconnect causes the distrust, because they just don't know each other. There's a lot of history into that. Don't get me wrong, a lot of history spoken to, the separation of the two. But I think that part, because the healthcare system is huge, so broad, in so many ways, from mental. I mean, there's a lot of areas. But I think if the healthcare community took that seriously and really went into the neighborhoods blocks by block and really started to inject themselves on an intimate level, educating the folks, and then also to charge the leaders like the Dr. Pitt of the world to reproduce themselves. reproduce themselves so that there can be the baton handed off, and so it won't stop. So that would be where I would stop with that question. Those three things there, getting the healthcare system to in themselves intimately and get to know the community, and the community get to know them. Then the education starts, and then the reproducing of the leaders that are out there doing it, like Dr. Pitts, would be where I would go.
Well, I saddle up with both of you on those things that you find to be priorities. Education would be and is my number one, but it takes a different twist because it would be about completely changing our education system, and that curriculum does not really serve our community well. For our redefining of what community looks like now. There's no way in the world that young Black kings and queens should be still learning about Romeo and Juliet. There's no significance in the world on what that story brings when they leave those schools. So it's just ridiculous. And so that part then becomes number two, which is to find a way to motivate and engage community in the lives, into how schools operate. That there should be, if you're going to march on something, and I'm not a proponent of marching all the time, and that's a whole nother story. But if we're going to march on something, go march up on the schools. Go march up on the school district. Show strength in numbers and say, this must change. This must change. And it's not just about metal detectors and transparent book bags to find weapons. Our children are being, from an education perspective, they're being assaulted with information that serves them of no purpose in most cases. And so there needs to be the return of vocational, not to antiquate us, because technology is where we are, but it needs to be so available that for the student who does not go to college, for the student who does not decide that there is opportunity past their 12th grade year, that there are entry and portals into entrepreneurship and ownership that is not simply just working for somebody. And so I think that ownership becomes that other piece of it, that we have so many renters in community, so many rental properties, that there at times is not the responsibility that comes with ownership. Well, part of that is to help people become owners. How do we now galvanize where we're not able to take an income and buy 3 properties, to galvanize 6 incomes to buy a property, and then as a collective to become homeowners and understand those things? So for me, it's re-education, it's literacy. We talked about that: medical literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, literacy about my body, to become literate about those things that truly change the narrative of community. I would wrap those in 1 and 2, just so I can have an extra number 3. Just so I can have an extra number 3. And that would be media. The narrative is destroying us. The marketing of who we are, the branding of who we are, is destroying us. We've been taught for so many years that this is what we should look like. This is who we are. This is all we can settle for. This is our norm. And in reality, if we could get hold of and begin to utilize platforms, even as small as ours, to change the narrative about self, I am a firm believer that would happen if we could combat those narratives. Somewhere tonight on the 6 o'clock news, our community is going to give 55 minutes of how terrible we are, how we're killing each other, and the worst of us, and then they'll spend the last 2 minutes after the last commercial about a fireman getting a cat out of a tree. I mean,
right. Because we don't own media, we don't own the medias too. We need to start like the ownership piece. It goes back to that, so that we can control the narrative. So yeah, you're right. I agree.
Yeah, we've got to be able to hear about the Miriam clinics that are available. We've got to be able to hear the stories of the men and women who are embedded in community and make change every day. And so those are the three things for me. Dr. Pitts, as we put the plane in the hangar for today, I would like to ask you, how can entities like North Philly Project, how can we promote, how can we support the work that you are doing?
Put out the word about, and I know you already do this, so I'm going to sort of like tell you, indicate things that you already do. Put out the word about healthcare, right? But also, in so doing, how can we be given a platform, a stage, as it were, to come before people and groups of individuals and talk about issues of healthcare that are pertinent to the neighborhood, right? I need to know, and people who do the work that I and my colleagues at Miriam do, we need to know what are the barriers to health in Philadelphia. We need to know, somebody have trouble getting to the doctor? Does someone have trouble getting to the doctor because they had issues with whether or not they had to go to a job interview or not? So, you know, those kinds of things, which have nothing to do with, you know, I'm going to diagnose you with high blood pressure or not, but I need to know those people's stories. I think they are pertinent to the issue. And if we do, if you give us a platform, right, to come before people to talk about those issues and just to listen to people, right, we can begin a hard work of healing this community and creating relationships and connectedness. That's really where it starts. So yeah, that would be what I would say.
Well, I can tell you now that North Philly Project is committed to smart, intentional collaborations. This is one, and that we're going to utilize any sphere of influence that we have. We're going to utilize any platform that's available to us, and we're going to lock arms with you and with Miriam Medical Clinic to go into our communities and to make some impactful, sustainable change, and be able to help people with access into the portal of healthcare. And in committing to do so, Dr. Pitts, we're also going to make sure that those who are aligned with us and those that we align to also are able to, whatever degree they're able to, make the same commitment. Again, I've said it, and maybe this is the third time, I don't know, Terrence, but the line in the sand is drawn. I mean, we just cannot wait another minute to create our own healing, to create our own healing. And so I'm so grateful for you, Dr. Pitts, coming on today. Terrence, give us some last words from you, good brother, as we put the plane in the hangar, then Dr. Pitts, and then I'll park it.
I mean, I'm just in lockstep with you. The line is drawn in the sand, and we have to stop looking outward and start looking inward. And because it starts with that man, that when we look at it in the mirror every day to make a decision, to educate ourselves, to afford ourselves to that transparency, to understanding, ourselves and the healthcare system and how it works, and open ourselves to the education to learn so that we can stand on that line and say, enough is enough. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get well so that I can make a way for the next generation. So that's my last word.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terrence. Dr. Pitts, sir, what is your last word for today as we put the plane in the hangar?
So yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on. One of the things that just occurred to me as you're talking, and as the three of you have addressed so many issues that we need to walk together in terms of doing what we're doing, right? As you know, as I mentioned to you, I grew up in Zion Baptist Church, which is right at the corner of Broad and Venango Street, right? And so and we had a large painting mural on one of our walls that said, "Walk together, children, don't you get weary," right? And so, with that, I would implore anybody on this call to make sure that whatever we are about in community and healthcare and finance, that is, handling our finances and all of those kinds of things, that we walk together in doing that. I think that's the only way we're going to make our way out of this thing that we're in Philadelphia with regards to street violence and poverty and all of that. Just walk together and don't get weary while we're doing it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. It is our honor, and we concur. We concur. I'm gonna go ahead and speak for my brother Terrence, but I know it's true. We concur. We've got to do this together. Together we go far, and we can't give up. We can't give up. I was watching a piece last night. LeBron was interviewing Barack Obama, President Obama, and one of the things that President Obama said that really ignited in my spirit last night when I saw the interview, and it was simply this: that if we give up, we fail and insult our ancestors. That meant more to me than anything that I heard last night. And it's we can't give up, and we owe it to our future. We owe it to our legacy. We owe it to come after us, to be able to set the table in such a way that they can now just take it and create the meal that they want. And so we owe it to them. So I'm with you on that. Dr. Pitts, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Terrence, as usual, my brother, thank you for hanging out with us today. We're actually all substituting for Gail Day, our wellness director. She's on vacation. I told her we would hang out today. So this is Wellness and You, North Philly Project's offering for wellness and community. We do this every last Saturday of the month. Starting in September, you'll be seeing more of Wellness and You. These are conversations about health and wellness in North Philly. Our conversations are all topic on wellness, on healing of our body, our minds, our souls. We're going to share these on our social media network. We're going to make sure that if you go to the YouTube channel, first, please subscribe to North Philly Project's YouTube channel. I want to get 10,000 subscriptions by the end of the year. I'm going to work hard at that. It's my goal. That's what I'm going for. I want to share this on social media platforms to make sure people have these conversations. Again, our guest was Dr. Neil Pitts, one of the founders of the Miriam Medical Clinics of Philadelphia, a great comrade, a great brother, great king, and a partner in collaboration. I'm Aaron Wells, and for North Philly Project, we wish you a fond adieu. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Stay hydrated. Remember, COVID is real. Do those things to protect you and your family, and we'll see you soon. Much love.